I'm Julie Zenner along with Dennis Anderson, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
A UMD professor's special robots are making the jump from the lab to assisting the elderly in nursing homes. We'll tell you more tonight.
What's it like to be a refugee forced to flee your country? Find out in a Refugee for 50 Minutes event at UWS next week.
And we'll have a video report from the topping out ceremony at the new Essentia Hospital under construction in Duluth.
Those stories and voices of the region coming up on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. And Denny, most folks in the region saw at least a little bit of snow this week. It's that time of year again.
I think here in Duluth we saw mostly flurries coming down pretty good at some times. But to our north, yeah, they had snow on the ground.
Yeah, pretty soon it'll be sticking around here too.
I think you're right.
All right. Well, let's get started with the headlines.
All right. Thank you very much, Julie. A release from the Duluth International Airport this week had some good news and some bad news. Airport officials say travel through Duluth has seen a comeback over the pandemic-reduced numbers of 2020. But at the same time, United Airlines has cut the number of daily flights between Duluth and Chicago because of a pilot shortage.
The Wisconsin DNR reported this week record high recycling values for paper and plastics. Box manufacturers are fueling demand as they require more boxes for shipping e-commerce purchases. Mixed paper, which had no value in 2019, now sells for $100 per ton. And the number 2 plastic that milk jugs are made of sells for a record $2,000 per ton.
The Lake Superior Marine Museum Association's annual Gales of November program this weekend has gone virtual. The program wraps up on Saturday with presentations on Great Lakes shipwrecks and another for the boat nerd in the family. To see the free presentations, you can point your browser to the association's website, lsmsa.com. Do it now.
And ready or not, the holiday season kicks off with a bang next week in Duluth. The annual Christmas City of the North Parade starts the festivities next Friday, November 19th through downtown Duluth. Then next Saturday night, the Bentleyville Light Display opens for the season at Bayfront Park. Both events are free and open to the public.
A report released today by associations representing nursing and assisted living homes has some startling numbers. Now, since the pandemic began, these homes have seen a loss of 220,000 jobs, about 14% of their employees. A UMD professor's work with robots that can augment care will soon help fill that gap, thanks to a recent agreement with a nursing home company. And so joining us now is Arshia Khan, a professor of computer science at UMD. Arshia, thank you so very much for being with us tonight. This is a fascinating subject. You're very much into the world of robotics. How big is the world of robotics, and is it continuing to spread at a pretty fast clip?
It is growing pretty fast. It is growing especially because of the pandemic, you know. People are realizing how useful the robots can be when human beings aren't able to do certain things, go certain places, then the robots can do their job.
And some of the work that you're doing is trying to figure out ways that robots can interact with and help patients with dementia or people with dementia.
Exactly.
Give some examples of the kinds of things that maybe robots could do that people might not think about.
Yeah, when we talk about robots assisting the elderly, we are talking about augmenting care, not replacing care. And so how can we augment care? They can take up jobs that the human beings find them boring, for instance, things that are repetitive. Like, for instance, if they are sitting and having a conversation with somebody with dementia, you know, the repetition can get annoying after a while, so repeating the same thing. Human beings' tone would change, but the robot's tone would never change. The robot's interaction with the human would still always be the same no matter what, how many times the robot repeats something. So for instance, my robots offer reminiscence therapy. So when they are offering this therapy, they are basically talking about the past and sharing things from their past and discussing, bringing up things that happened in the past. So if they are repeating that multiple times, their tone is never going to change. They can continuously keep reminding and talking and interacting with the human, whereas the human beings can get tired of it. And then, you know, that human being can be free to do something more important for the person with dementia.
Professor, do some people fear robots, that they may take over life over a period of years?
Absolutely, absolutely. All the science fiction scares the people, unfortunately. And so one thing that people need to realize is robots won't do anything we don't tell them to do it. So essentially we are programming them to do whatever we want them to do. So they will never take over the world, at least not for another couple of centuries. You know, we are not there yet.
Not as we see in the movies.
No. Definitely not.
And we have some video up of the robots that you're working with. Talk a little bit about that robot in particular.
Yeah, so this robot was built in Japan, and it's shipped to the US, and we purchase it from a company that's basically, you know, selling it to us. And we program them to do things for the elderly. So like the robots tell jokes, for instance, have small conversations, you know. So it's sort of engaging the person, trying to improve their social life.
Eventually, do you think some people will be able to buy robots, either for companionship or to help work around the house?
Absolutely. We will see that day, hopefully soon. Yeah. But one thing is very clear, that they are not going to hurt people unless, you know, it falls or something like that. But it only can do what we program it to do. It cannot do anything beyond that. It doesn't have a mind of its own, you know.
It sounds like what you're working toward with some of these patients is a very emotional connection with the robot.
Exactly.
And you work with these robots every day. Do you have an emotional connection to them?
I do. I do, especially my robots, because they do facial recognition, and we ran those facial recognition algorithms on them, so they recognize me. Because
so you come in the morning and they say hi?
they do recognize me, and as soon as they hear my voice in the background, you know, we can monitor their log. And you can see that, you know, they say my name, and you can see whatever I'm saying, they are listening to that.
Is there some trial and error when you're programming robots?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, they are not perfect. The technology still needs a lot of work. So they are like, you know, when we are having a conversation with them, especially when they are wearing a mask, the sound is muffled, so they don't hear so clearly, you know, they misinterpret. But they are very good at having conversations, whatever we program them to do, you know. Apply natural language processing algorithms to them, and they do a good job.
And it sounds like after the first of the year, they're going to actually be out in the real world in some nursing facilities.
Yes, yes. Coming January 1st, we are going to start deploying robots, 2 robots at each facility, at 8 of Monarch's facilities. Yeah.
You've said that robots can actually advance humanity. How can they do that?
Because they're able to assist us. They're able to relieve us of the mundane tasks, so we can tend to more intellectual tasks.
What are your students, how do they feel about this? Because it looks like they're really hands-on in this project too, interacting. Are they helping with the programming too?
Yes, they are. They are. They love it. They fall in love with the robots just like I do. And they enjoy working with the robots. And you know, we sort of develop personalities, attach personalities to these robots. So we build a connection with the robots. We have names for all the robots.
I was just going to ask you about personality. You have 7 robots. Do they all 7 have different personalities?
We attribute personalities to them. They are all the same, but you know,
yes.
we
you
do
give
that.
them their personality.
We give them the personalities, yes, yeah.
And you mentioned, we were talking a little bit before the show, that you're really trying to engage young women in robotics with your program.
Exactly, exactly. The team that is going to be working on this is majority women. So we are bringing in 5 female students just to help with this task, in addition to the students that I already have.
Well, I wish we had more time. We don't, and I really appreciate the fact you're here tonight. Fascinating subject. All the best.
Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate
Arshia
you inviting
Khan,
me.
Professor at UMD. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
It's time now for Voices of the Region. Each week we hear from a journalist covering stories of interest in the Northland. Well, this week our reporter is Danielle Kaeding with Wisconsin Public Radio.
Hunting ammunition is pretty hard to find just about everywhere across the country right now because of supply chain disruptions from the COVID-19 pandemic and the surging demand that we've seen with guns and ammunition. And gun dealers in the area are saying that they're really struggling to stock the shelves as gun sales have climbed in the last year. And that's due to the unease that we've seen stemming from the pandemic and civil unrest with racial injustice movements, and also the 2020 presidential election. And so Pat Kukul, who owns Superior Shooter Supply, was saying that, over the summer they had a shortage of shotgun ammunition or shot shells for trap shooting. And now that we're heading into rifle season here in Wisconsin, they just haven't had certain types of popular ammo right now because it seems to be disappearing in a single day, it seems. So Kukul has been rationing ammunition to 1 box per person, and she's been trying to keep a box on hand for every gun that they sell. And they're seeing demand for guns all across the board, shotguns, rifles, handguns. And the National Shooting Sports Foundation estimates that more than 8 million people bought a gun for the first time last year. And as kind of a sign related to the uptick in gun sales, the Wisconsin Department of Justice reported that handgun background checks surged 175% last year. The Bayfield County Board recently updated their county zoning ordinance to bar bottling plants in industrial zoned areas of the county. And this all came as Duluth resident Crystal Myshak, who owns the company Crystal KLR or Crystal Clear, has proposed harvesting and selling water from an artesian well in the town of Clover within the county, and then bottling that water at a facility in Superior. Myshak sought a special land use permit earlier this year for an irrigation facility in an area that wasn't zoned industrial. It was zoned for use as residential development or recreational businesses. And the county zoning committee rejected her application. She appealed that decision, but the county board of appeals upheld that earlier decision. So Myshak is still challenging the county's denial of that permit, though now in court. And so after all of that, the county has decided to remove the possibility of any future applicants coming forward to request authorization to build a water bottling plant in an industrial area of the county. This change, it would not impact the Crystal KLR proposal because that happened prior to this ordinance change. Myshak has filed litigation to challenge the county's decisions related to the denial of her application. And it remains to be seen whether or not that challenge will move forward. Recently, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation unveiled the first dual language sign in Bayfield County in partnership with the Red Cliff Tribe. And the agency has been working with Wisconsin tribes to update signage on state highways to display the English and native words for the tribe's names. And the sign at Red Cliff now displays the tribe's name, Red Cliff, as well as the tribal name, Gamiskawabikan, including the tribe's seal and population. So Transportation Secretary Craig Thompson said that they're really excited about these dual language signs. It signifies a sense of place for Red Cliff and other tribes. And Red Cliff Tribal Chairman Christopher Boyd said that they're honored to be the first tribe to roll this out and show visitors that they're entering the boundaries of the reservation. So, and if you're wondering, as far as I know, Gamiskawabikan means the place where there is red rock cliffs. This is just another example of the Evers administration signaling that they recognize tribal sovereignty and that they are committed to working with tribes to highlight that as they move forward in discussions related to state-tribal relations.
Recently, thousands of refugees from Afghanistan fled to America and other countries after the United States withdrew its military from the country. So, what's it like to become a refugee? University of Wisconsin Superior Professor Haji Dohanchi is here to talk about a Refugee for 50 Minutes experience that he has organized at UWS. Haji, thank you very much for being here tonight. What's the whole idea behind Refugee for 50 Minutes? What's it all about?
Okay, the whole idea is to teach people about what it means to be a refugee. And you know, you can try to engage people by reading books, but that's a little too extensive. So I wanted to have something that would allow our students, my students especially, to come out and to engage other people, their colleagues, their peers, their community members, and become teachers. So first benefit is for my students, so they can teach about this. But the other thing was to have something that's manageable, 50 minutes experience, where you can go out and tell people what is a refugee. There are a lot of misconceptions. So a lot of people don't know, for example, what's the difference between a stateless person versus a refugee versus a migrant. So this allows the students to come out and become experts in the field. And they read books on this subject, but they never, you know, they can always get exams. We can give them exams for this, but this way they are actually teaching what they learn in the books.
Mm-hmm. What does the experience look like for people who show up and participate? Walk us through that 50-minute journey and where that takes them.
Well, that was one of the difficult parts. The idea was that there is no single journey. Every experience is different. I was thinking about this the other day. Every year about 4,000 refugees die in Mediterranean Sea trying to go to Europe. We never talk about them only because they don't make it. So their journey just ends right there. And I think people have this notion that there is a beginning point and there is an end point. And you know, this is not a Hollywood story. Yeah. There is a beginning point, but then there is all sorts of variations depending on the country of origin, depending on how many countries you go to, depending on time period. So one of the things I do is we actually roll a dice. So if you come in, we start with Afghanistan, you roll a dice, and the dice pretty much determines what happens next, whether you stay in the country, whether you step on a landmine and die right there, or whether you go to Iran. And if then the same thing with the next country. So we go from country to country, and as you change your status, so for example, as you move from Afghanistan, let's say you move to another part of Afghanistan, you become an internally displaced person. But if you cross the border, you're a refugee.
What's the definition then of a refugee?
We use the International Convention, 1951 International Convention on Refugees. It specifically states that you are a refugee if you have a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, nationality, religion.
In your home country?
In any country, yes.
Mm-hmm. So, in your experience, what are the reasons that most people then leave their country to go find life somewhere else?
There is variety. Most predominant ones war. Mm-hmm. And outright persecution. I think it would be kind of hard for us to fathom that countries would do this, but for example, if you are, let's say, in Myanmar and you happen to be Muslim, they just declare the segment of the Muslims as non-citizens. So that's a form of persecution. So it's not, you know, the problem is that these things continue to happen even in 2021. So war and persecution tends to be the number 1 and 2 reasons for the displacement.
So how open is the United States into allowing refugees to come here?
It has changed from president to president. Over the last 40 years, we have had roughly about 80 to 120,000 people coming in annually. In the last 4 years, the numbers kind of plummeted, but now President Biden has promised to bring the number up to about, I think, 125,000.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are some things that you think people don't really understand about refugees that they should know about and consider in their conversations and in just how they think about it?
I think ultimately is their humanity. We know it is a number, so it's kind of, and also there's a lot of fear mongering. I'm afraid, so it kind of creates this notion that somehow there are hordes of people coming in to try to invade. I think the numbers are somewhat overwhelming. So when you look at, for example, 80 million displaced people, that's larger than Germany or France. So people get, you know, cautious about this, but we are roughly talking about 1.4 million people in the entire globe that are actually in need of resettlement. So that number is much more manageable. And I think if you look at, for example, the state of Minnesota, they have placed 40,000 refugees over the last 40 years. So you can talk about, for example, the Hmong experience in Wisconsin or in Minnesota. You can talk about the Somali experience in Minnesota. One of the things I use in my class is that I ask my students, how many of you have traveled, for example, in Minneapolis Airport? It is almost impossible to travel in Minneapolis Airport without coming across a Somali, most likely a refugee or a migrant wearing a hijab.
We're almost out of time. Do we have many refugees coming to live here in the Northland?
At the moment, no, not in the Northland specifically, but there are, I think, about 12,000 refugees in Fort McCoy, which is in about 220 miles south of here.
And they're doing what there?
They are only in a military base right now and until they get processed, and then they will get resettled.
I see, okay.
And the voyage is actually just the beginning of the trip, because once they get to a place, the resettlement itself, I imagine, is quite a journey.
There is an entire set of books about these, about the kind of issues they face. There is legal, but there is, religious discrimination, or even just, for example, things we don't recognize. I know, the things we take for granted, using the public transportation,
sure.
Getting a driver's license. These things are not something that refugees are aware of. So
yeah.
there is a lot of need to help them.
And with that, we have to end the conversation. Professor, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, Essentia Health's $900 million hospital project dubbed Vision Northland reached a milestone this week. A topping out ceremony was held as the final beam was placed at the top of the massive structure. WDSE videographer Steve Ash covered the event and brings us this story.
The last time we gathered here to celebrate the Vision Northland project was September of 2019. It was a wonderful day for groundbreaking. It was a good kickoff for the project. And at that time, we knew it would be a challenging project. Yet little did we know what challenges would lay forward to the next several years as we built this building. This morning, I was thinking back all the way to March 25th, 2020, when the governor declared a stop to all non-vital work. And I remember standing in my office and we were talking about it, well, does that mean this project? So I sent a note to the chief of staff and he said, let me get back to you on that. The only medical analogy I can give to that is when a baby is born and you're waiting for that first breath. And we waited about 10 minutes. He said, nope, it's vital work. And so I didn't require resuscitation and the project didn't require resuscitation, and we've moved forward.
Essentia Health is making the largest private investment in Duluth's history. And as we transform the downtown medical campus, the $900 million that's being sent, it's more than a building project. It's about how Essentia Health is going to take care of its patients, continue to take care of its patients, and matching its facilities to how medicine is practiced now and into the future. Healthcare has obviously dramatically changed since St. Mary's Medical Center was founded by the Benedictine Sisters in 1888.
Planning an event in Duluth in November outside. What could go wrong? But nothing. We were proud to help Essentia through this time with funding in Washington, with help with telehealth, and we're going to continue that help in any way. But you should be so proud of this new space, 942,000 square feet, but who's counting? For perspective, that's more square feet than 16 football fields.
We haven't yet said this, but Essentia Health has overachieved their goal of workforce development that the city asked of them, and it is tremendous to know that I think it's about 14% of hours on this project have been conducted by people who are people of color, women, and new underemployed people into the construction workforce. That is significant, that is big, that is bold, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful. I think in closing, I just want to acknowledge that I think the community is really excited about this project. And the reason I know is because I do not get any complaints about these road closures. And I'm used to getting a few street complaints.
But I want to take a moment to reflect on exactly what we're here to celebrate. in addition to everything that's already been mentioned, and that is to uniquely honor the accomplishment of the essential construction crews. To date, over 2,140 skilled men and women dedicated to their craft have worked safely and diligently to help us reach this milestone. And so most importantly, we're here to celebrate an impeccable safety record. Over 1 million hours worked, only 1 lost time accident, and I am proud to say that that individual is actively back at work without restrictions.
Today is very special as we move from the groundbreaking ceremony of September of 2019 to the topping off ceremony of today. It's another significant step forward as we move to complete the project. I want to thank all of you for your support we've received from all kinds of sources on this project. As it's been said many times, it takes a village to make good things happen. Thank you.
Well, that's our time this week, but you can keep up with our latest posts by following Almanac North on Facebook and Twitter. Check out the WDSE website for program updates, news about the station and upcoming events, and download the PBS video app to watch your favorite PBS programs anytime you please. And Denny, I guess cold and snow will be the new reality for the next few months?
Well, we're already into almost mid-November, so it's here.
Yeah.
Anytime now.
Getting close
to
winter anyway.
You bet.
All right. Well, thanks to our guests and to the crew here in the studio. With Dennis Anderson, I'm Julie Zenner. We'll see you next time.